People will judge me. They will call me names, but they don't know my story. They don't know what it's like to survive, to cling to the only person who's ever truly been there. This is my truth, no matter how twisted it sounds. You know, when I say traumatic childhood, it's not just a phrase. It's the kind of thing that seeps into your bones, makes you question everything. I grew up in a house where yelling was the lullaby and fear was the bedtime story. There was a lot of things a child shouldn't see. Shouldn't hear things that made me feel small, worthless. It was a constant battle, just to feel safe, just to feel like I existed. And then at 16, I found out I was pregnant. 16. A child having a child. I was kicked out, told I was a disgrace, a burden. The words still echo in my head, sometimes sharp and cruel. My family, they just turned their backs. It was like I ceased to exist. I was alone. Utterly, completely alone. My Aunt God, bless her soul, she took me in. She was the only one. But even with her help, life was a struggle. I worked any job I could find, diner shifts, cleaning houses, anything to make a few dollars. I was a mother, but I was still a kid myself. I didn't know how to do any of this. I was scared, always scared Henry. He was born into this chaos. He didn't ask for it, but he got it. He was tiny, fragile, and he depended on me, and I in turn depended on him. It was just us against the world. We moved a lot, from one cramped apartment to another, sometimes sleeping in the car. There were nights, especially when he was little, so cold, so bitter. I'd hold him close, wrap him in every blanket we had, and just pray for morning. He'd sleep against me, his little body warm against mine, and for those few hours, I felt like I could protect him, like I could protect us both. We were homeless for a while, not the kind of homeless you see on TV, with shelters and hot meals. We were the kind of homeless that slept in the back of a beat-up sedan, the kind that ate cold sandwiches from gas stations, the kind that washed up in public restrooms. We learned to be invisible, to blend in. We learned to survive, and through it all, Henry was my rock. He was the only constant in a life filled with chaos. He was my son, yes, but he was also my best friend, my confidant, my protector. In his own way, we were a team, a unit. There was nothing we wouldn't do for each other. Our situation, it shaped us. It molded us into something different. We didn't have the luxury of normal boundaries in the tiny apartments we lived in. Privacy was a myth. We shared everything. There was a time. For years, we lived in a place where the bathroom was communal. It was always crowded, always dirty, so we adapted. We'd fill a bucket with water and wash up in our room. It was easier, quicker, and sometimes Henry, being a kid, would just, he'd pee in the sink or a jar. It was gross, yes, I know that, but it was our normal. It was what we did. We didn't have the space or the time or the energy for anything else. We'd seen too much, been hurt too much. We were a fortress, two people against the world, and in that fortress, we created our own rules, our own way of doing things. When I showered at night, he'd often come and stand guard, make sure no one bothered me. Then he'd use the same water after me, because why waste it? It was practical. It was efficient. And in our world, those things mattered. Henry, he grew up fast. He had to. He saw things a child shouldn't see, experience things a child shouldn't experience. But he never complained. He never blamed me. He just was. He was strong, resilient. He was my son, but he was also my strength. Henry was in university working part-time. I had my 2 jobs. We were making it. We had food on the table, clothes that weren't falling apart, a roof over our heads. It felt like we were finally catching our breath. But then the weight of everything started to settle in. Years of pushing, years of surviving. It takes its toll. I started to feel heavy, like I was carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders, my depression. It wasn't new, but it was getting worse. I was exhausted, bone-tired dread. Work became a blur. I'd come home, eat something quick, and just collapse on the mattress. All I wanted was sleep, a few hours of oblivion. Henry noticed. Of course he always did. He started being overly attentive. It wasn't that he was never caring. He was always that. But this was different. He'd make sure I ate, even if it was just a bowl of soup. He'd ask me how my day was, really listen to the answer. He'd try to make me laugh. Tell me about his day. It was sweet, but it also made me feel guilty, like I was failing him, like I was letting him down. And then there was his nightlife. Henry had friends, and well, he liked to go out parties, clubs, whatever. It wasn't a secret. He'd always been social. It was his way of, I don't know, escaping. Maybe he never had a father figure, so he found his own ways to build connections to find his place. I didn't mind. He deserved to have a life to have fun, but lately it seemed like he was out every night. He'd come home late, sometimes in the early hours of the morning, smelling of smoke and cheap cologne. He'd try to be quiet, but I'd hear him anyway. The creak of the door, the rustle of his clothes, and I'd lie there in the dark, wondering where he was, what he was doing. There was this one night. I remember I woke up around 3 a.m. I heard him come in stumbling a little. He whispered something to himself, something I couldn't quite make out. He fumbled with his keys, then finally managed to get the door closed. He didn't turn on the light, just walked straight to his mattress and collapsed. I heard him sigh a long, drawn-out sigh. It sounded tired. Not just physically tired, but emotionally tired, like he was carrying his own burdens. A few days later, the window broke. Some kids throwing rocks, just being reckless. It was a stupid accident, but it was a problem. The landlord boarded it up, said it would be a few days before he could get it fixed. The room got cold, especially at night. It was late fall. The air was getting that bite to it. We tried to laugh it off, said we'd been through worse than we had. But still it was uncomfortable. That night it was freezing. I was so tired, so uncomfortable. I couldn't get warm. Henry suggested we put our mattresses together, share blankets. It seemed like a practical solution. We'd done it before when we were younger, when we were homeless. It was just a way to stay warm. So we pushed the mattresses together, piled up the blankets. He held me just like he used to. When he was little, it was comforting in a way. I fell asleep, quickly exhausted, but then I kept waking up. He was moving around, shifting, tossing, and turning. I asked him what was wrong, why he couldn't get comfortable. He just mumbled something about being too warm, then too cold. But then I got cold, really cold, and I moved back to him. As we shifted, I felt something hard. Against me, it was his tool. I froze. I didn't know what to say. I asked him about it, my voice barely a whisper. He mumbled something about being uncomfortable, then suggested he just take care of it. I drifted back to sleep, or at least I thought I did, but the image of his hardness, it lingered. It was a strange, unsettling feeling. I hadn't touched a man in over a year. My life had been so consumed by survival, by work, by that intimacy, that part of me had just shut down. I woke up again sometime later. The room was still cold, but I felt warm, not physically, but inside a strange, unfamiliar warmth. I shifted, and I felt a dampness between my legs. I was confused. I hadn't had a dream, at least not one I could remember. But then the images flashed back, Henry's hardness, the feel of him in my hand. It wasn't a dream. I realized I was aroused. It was a shock. I hadn't felt anything like that in so long. It was like a part of me. A part one thought was dead had suddenly come back to life. I felt a mix of confusion, guilt, and something else. Something I couldn't quite name. I lay there trying to make sense of what I was feeling. I thought about Henry, about what had happened. I tried to push it away to tell myself it was just a reaction to the physical contact, but the feeling wouldn't go away. It was there, pulsing, insistent. I moved my hand tentatively under the blanket. I touched myself and the feeling intensified. It was like a dam had broken, releasing a flood of pent-up desire. I moved faster, harder, lost in the sensation. It was a strange, almost desperate release. I was alone, but I wasn't. It was like Henley was there in the room watching me, and then it happened. He rolled over. His arm brushed against me and I froze, My heart pounded in my chest. I was mortified. What if he saw me? What if he knew what I was doing? I slowly, carefully moved my hand away, pulling it back under the blanket. I held my breath, waiting for him to say something, to do something. But he didn't. He just lay there, his arms still resting against me. I could feel his warmth, his presence. It was like he was a part of me, like we were connected in some strange, unsettling way. I tried to calm myself to slow my breathing. I tried to convince myself that he hadn't seen anything, that he was still asleep, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I felt exposed, vulnerable. It was like he had seen into my soul, seen the part of me I had tried to hide even from myself. I wanted to disappear, to vanish into thin air. I lay there for what felt like an eternity, my heart still racing. I tried to sleep, but I couldn't. My mind was racing, replaying the events of the night. I thought about Mitchell, about our relationship. I thought about the way we had crossed a line I never thought we would cross. Finally. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to do something. I started to move my hand again slowly, cautiously. I needed to release the tension to find some kind of relief. I moved faster, more urgently desperate for the release, and then it happened again. He rolled over this time, turning his back to me. I took a deep breath and continued. I was close, so close to the release that I thought would finally allow me to sleep. But then I felt it, his big tool, pressing against my arm. I gasped my body, teasing. I grabbed him, instinctively squeezing him. As I came, it was a primal reaction, a reflex. He woke up with a start, his voice filled with confusion and shock. "Mom, what are you doing?" I froze my bodies, still trembling from the feelings. I didn't know what to say. I couldn't look at him. I stammered. Il was dreaming. I apologized over and over, my voice, barely a whisper. I was mortified, ashamed. I felt like I had violated him, violated our relationship. My feelings were quickly replaced with a wave of intense shame. He was silent for a moment. Then he asked, his voice still shaky, "Why? Why were you touching me?" I didn't know how to answer. I couldn't tell him the truth. I just mumbled something about a bad dream, about being confused. I got defensive, telling him it was a dream, but then turned it on him, asking him why his tool was out. He said he must have forgotten it when I gave him a hand stuff I brushed. I asked if we could forget about it, and he agreed. I knew deep down that we couldn't. We couldn't erase what had happened. We couldn't go back to how things were. Something had changed, something had broken, and I didn't know if we could ever fix it. The morning after, it was like walking on eggshells. The air in the studio apartment, already thick with the scent of our shared existence, felt heavier charged. We didn't talk about what had happened. We couldn't. It was like there was an invisible barrier between us, a wall of unspoken shame and confusion. I tried to act normal. I made breakfast a simple affair of toast and instant coffee. I tried to smile to make small talk, but my voice sounded strained. My smile felt forced. Henry, he was quiet, withdrawn. He kept his eyes down, avoiding mine. He moved around the room like a ghost, his movements hesitant, unsure. We were both pretending that nothing had changed, that everything was fine, but it was a lie, a fragile facade that could shatter at any moment. The silence was deafening, filled with unspoken questions, with the weight of what had happened. I felt a wave of guilt wash over me. How could I have done that? To my son, the one person I was supposed to protect. I was his mother, his protector, his everything, and I had violated that trust. I had crossed a line that should never have been crossed. I tried to reconcile my actions to find some kind of explanation. I told myself it was a mistake, a moment of weakness. I told myself I was tired, stressed, overwhelmed, but deep down, I knew it was more than that. It was a blurring of boundaries, a consequence of our shared trauma, of our unusual closeness. I looked at Henry, at his downcast eyes, and I felt a pang of something, Not desire, not anymore, but a deep, aching sadness. We had always been so close, so connected, and now there was this chasm between us. He finally spoke, his voice barely a whisper. "Mom, can we just forget about it?" I nodded, my throat tight. "Yeah, Mitchell, we can forget about it," but we both knew we couldn't. We couldn't erase the memory, the feeling of his body against mine, the sound of his shocked voice. It was there, etched into our minds, a permanent scar on our relationship. The rest of the day was a blur. I went to work, but I couldn't focus. My mind kept replaying the events of the night, torturing me with images and sounds. I felt like everyone was looking at me, judging me. I imagined them whispering, pointing, calling me names. When I got home, Henry was gone. He had left a note on the table saying he was going to a friend's place. I didn't know if he was coming back. I didn't know if he ever wanted to see me again. I sat on the mattress, the same mattress where it had all happened, and I cried. I cried for Henry, for myself, for the life we had lost. I cried for the innocent that had been shattered. The next few days were excruciating. Henry came back, but he was different. He was distant, guarded. He barely spoke to me. We moved around each other like strangers, avoiding eye contact, keeping our distance. The tension in the apartment was unbearable. It was like we were living in a pressure cooker waiting for it to explode. I wanted to talk to him, to explain, to apologize, but I didn't know how. I didn't know what to say. One night, I finally broke the silence. "Henry, we need to talk." He looked at me, his eyes filled with a mix of fear and resignation. "About what, Mom?" About what happened." He looked away. "There's nothing to talk about." "Yes, there is, Mitchell, please. We can't just pretend it didn't happen." He sighed, a long, weary sigh. "What do you want me to say?" "Mom, it was weird. It was messed up. Can we just leave it at that?" "No. Henry, we can't just leave it at that. We need to understand what happened. We need to fix this." He shook his head. "There's nothing to fix. Mom, it's done. It's over, but it's not over. Henry, it's not over for me. Lee, need you to understand. I need you to forgive me." He looked at me, his eyes filled with a pain that mirrored my own. "I don't know if I can." "Mom." His words hit me like a physical blow. I felt my heart sink. I had broken him, broken our bond, and I didn't know if I could ever fix it. We tried to pretend it didn't happen, but it was there, hanging between us. The air was thick, with unspoken questions, with a shame I couldn't shake. We were two people trapped in a small room, bound by a secret that threatened to destroy us. The days that followed were a blur of guilt and self-loathing. I felt like I was living in a nightmare, a twisted version of my own life. Every time I looked at Henry, I saw the hurt in his eyes, the unspoken question that hung between us. "How could you?" it seemed to ask, and I had no answer. The guilt was a constant ache, a gnawing feeling in the pit of my stomach. I replayed the events of that night over and over in my mind, searching for a reason and explanation. But there was none. I had crossed a line I never thought I would cross. I had betrayed my son, the one person I loved more than anything in the world. Shame followed close behind a heavy blanket, smothering me. I felt dirty, tainted. I imagined what people would say if they knew a mother with her son. It was unthinkable taboo. I could see their disgusted faces, hear their condemning whispers. I was a monster, a freak. And then there was the confusion. How had it come to this? How had our relationship, once a source of strength and comfort, turned into something so twisted, so broken? I thought about our past, about the years of shared hardship, the lack of boundaries, the unusual closeness that contributed to what happened. Had we blurred the lines so much that we couldn't see where they were anymore? Our bond, once unbreakable, felt fragile, fractured. It was like a delicate piece of glass shattered into 1,000 pieces. I didn't know if we could ever put it back together. I didn't know if we could ever trust each other again. I spent hours alone, lost in my thoughts, trying to make sense of it all. I'd sit on the edge of the mattress, staring at the wall, tears streaming down my face. How could I have done that? I whispered to myself over and over. How could I have heard him like that? The question echoed in my mind. A constant haunting refrain was, I a monster. Had I ruined everything? Had I destroyed the only good thing in my life? I thought about Henry's future, about his life. He was young, talented, full of potential, and I had tainted, that I had burdened him with a secret that would haunt him for the rest of his life. I imagined him telling someone, a friend, a partner, about what had happened. I could see the look of shock, of disbelief, of disgust. I could hear their whispers, their judgments. I had stolen his innocence, his peace of mind. I thought about seeking help, about talking to someone, but who could I talk to? Who would understand? I was afraid of being judged, of being labeled, of being taken away. I was afraid of losing Mitchell, of losing the only person I had left. I was trapped in a cycle of self-blame, of regret. I couldn't escape the feeling that I had destroyed everything, that I had ruined our lives. I was a mother, yes, but I was also a failure as a mother, as a person. I was left with nothing but the echoes of my own mistakes, the haunting question that lingered in the silence. How could I have done that? There's no neat ending to this story. No grand reconciliation. No sudden epiphany that fixes everything. Life isn't like that. We don't get to rewind the clock to undo the mistakes we've made. What happened between Mitchell and me? It's a scar. It's a part of our story now, a part we can't erase. We're still trying to navigate this new reality. We're still learning how to live with the weight of what happened. Some days are better than others. Some days the silence is deafening, the tension unbearable, but we're trying. We're trying to find a way forward, to find a way to coexist in this small space, in this complicated relationship. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that there are no easy answers, no simple solutions to complex problems. Trauma, especially the kind we experienced, it leaves its mark, it warps your perception, it blurs the lines, and sometimes it leads you down paths you never thought you'd take. I know some of you will judge me, you'll call me names, you'll condemn my actions, but I hope just a little, that you'll try to understand, that you'll try to see the complexities of our situation, the layers of our story. If you're watching this and you've experienced something similar, or if you're struggling with trauma or complex family dynamics, please know that you're not alone. There are people who can help. There are resources available. Don't be afraid to reach out. Don't be afraid to ask for help. And to Mitchell, I know I've hurt you. I know I've broken your trust, and I'm sorry more than words can say. I hope one day we can find a way to heal, to rebuild what we've lost. I'm left with one question, one that lingers in my mind, and I'd like to leave it with you. Can we ever truly escape our past? Can we ever truly break free from the patterns that have shaped us? Have you ever experienced a situation where boundaries became blurred? Share your thoughts in the comments. Remember, we're all human and we all make mistakes. Let's talk about it.